One of the things about being an editor is that I guess there's no typical day. In a newsroom, every day is very different, which is one of the things that inspires me about the job. That said, there will be some routine elements. We will have, of a morning, our breakfast journalists, breakfast newsreaders who are in from the crack of dawn. Now they'll be thinking about everything that's going on at the moment, everything that's happened overnight, everything internationally, nationally and locally. That happens in the morning. There will sometimes be some dialogue between me and the Breakfast Bulletin editor across that. A lot of the time they are responsible for putting out that content themselves, and they're very well trained to do that. On other occasions they'll need to check things. We'll need to decide whether we need to go heavier on certain stories. We'll need to decide whether we need to extend news bulletins. We'll need to decide whether we need to enhance our coverage, get a reporter out earlier, those kind of things. From 9 AM onwards, then we're looking at the agenda for the rest of the day. So our reporters will start turning up if they haven't been called out already. And then we'll start moving through what happens for the rest of the day. The reporters will be assigned stories. The reporters will head out on those stories. They'll be given deadlines. They'll be expected to report back on those stories, so that then our breakfast newsreaders, our breakfast bulletin editors can hand over to the afternoon bulletin editors, and then they take on the baton and deliver all the news that people will want to hear when they come out of work and they want that update again. So there's kind of that routine, but then you can never expect there to be any routine, because something is bound to come in like a meteor. Not literally a meteor, thankfully yet, but like something is always going to dive in there and change the day and make it interesting, make it a bit more spicy. To a large extent, it's very focused on our listenership. That said, there's news that is news, and it will be in there irrespective of who is listening to the radio station. Gone are the days where people used to visualise one person who they were broadcasting to and then only put news stories on the news on that station that are relevant to that person. We're very well aware now that actually we have a broad spectrum of people who listen to Hallam FM and listen to our stations across the country. I love all sorts of things about being a news editor. I love the fact that things do change. Everything that you plan can go out the window. I love that. I love the fact that sometimes something can happen at 5 to the hour and you have to be informed about it, well informed enough that you can go onto the radio and at the very least make sense, at the very most explain to people what's going on and illuminate it. Now, there's that element. I also love, do you know what? I'm news editor, news and sport editor for the whole of England, but just the other day I couldn't resist. At 5:15 in the morning when I got a call from one of my newsreaders, Bank Holiday Monday, I couldn't resist because it was round the corner, going down to a huge fire and reporting on it. Well, yes and no. I think that we're very well able, because we do it ourselves as journalists, to know what's happening with smartphones and online. But radio is still a valuable medium and it still has a place. People listen to be entertained to the radio, and then we're giving them updates, largely speaking. So we're actually coming to people while they're doing something else. Whereas if you look at it from the smartphone point of view or online point of view, people are self-selecting, they have to opt in. And I think that actually we provide an opportunity to update people who don't necessarily go looking for that type of content. We have a big focus on multi-platform nowadays. We find that it's valuable, important, that it really has a different way for us to be able to engage with our audiences and the people who are listening and the people who love what we do. But it is exactly that. It's a different way, another way, an extra stream. With the Hillsborough inquest going on at the moment, there's a tendency to look back to 30 years ago, or 25 years ago in the case of Hillsborough, and wonder about how radio reporting, radio newsrooms have changed over the time. And some people suggest that because there are fewer people in radio news nowadays, that the output is less good than it was, less in depth than it was. I disagree. I think that if you take the Hillsborough inquest as an example, you would have had a reporter at the Hillsborough inquests who would have had to have been sat there. You'd have probably had to have had at least one other person who was able to leave to then broadcast back to the radio station. They might have had some kind of broadcasting technology. Chances are they would have had to have found a phone box and phoned in a very poor quality voicer. My point is that can take an hour. You run the risk of missing something that you've left. Nowadays, because of the technology, we're able to blog live from the Hillsborough inquests, and that's how radio is using smartphone technology and online technology to be able to enhance what we do. The worst part of the job can be the frustration from time to time. I don't know, I find that the worst parts of the job are the things that sometimes happen in the moment. How at the end of the day you can look back over all the frustrations, all the difficulties, all the challenges that you had to overcome to manage to get the news on the radio and get your reporters on the scene and get the content back from them to go on the radio. All of that stuff can be frustrating at times. It can be stressful. It can be really difficult. The worst part is in the moment. The best part is having achieved content, radio, news, as a result of that. So it's a funny one. I think maybe people that are in radio news like the challenge of overcoming some of the worst periods to get something that's great at the end. There's different key qualities depending on what role you're playing. If you're a breakfast bulletin editor, you need to be really quick at determining what is the day's news agenda. If you're a reporter, you need to be determined, tenacious, you need to be creative, you need to be able to be fast at doing the basics of the job, editing audio, writing scripts. And then those two elements together, reporter into bulletin editor, that's got to work so well to be able to achieve a fluid delivery of the news. The other part of that editorial team is the news editor role, and the news editor is about making quick decisions, solving these problems that I've been talking about in terms of staffing events, getting to everything. It's a full-time job nowadays, not only to find the news, but to sift through all the reams of press releases that we get sent by very, very media-savvy organisations who know that they can get publicity through doing spurious research about a certain topic. We have to be really, really clever and knowledgeable around what is news and what is tat that's going to ruin our integrity. The first piece of advice that I give them is don't expect to be in a senior role straight away, because you need air miles, on-air miles. You need experience. You need a great contacts book. And no matter how hard you try, you're not going to have that aged 16, 18, 20. Now that said, there are plenty of key things that people can do. Let me tell you what a few of those things are, because sometimes they're overlooked. The first thing to do is to ask yourself a really tough question, which is, do I just want to be involved in the glitz and glamour of the media, or am I really interested in being a journalist? Because these two things are not the same, okay? Now, one comes as a result of the other, but you have to have that passion for the stuff that isn't on the radio or the stuff that is behind the camera, because quite a lot of people come into my newsrooms on work placement and are disappointed by how unglamorous the newsroom environment is. Okay, because some of our most glamorous reporters, who are often doing video pieces for us, who are often online, who are often on the radio sounding fabulous, are just there in the office making phone calls a lot of the time. So ask yourself the question, do I want to be involved in the glamour, or do I want to be involved in the nitty-gritty of being a journalist? Now, if you answer that you want to be involved in the nitty-gritty of being a journalist, well then welcome.